The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. Joining me now, America's General Michael Flynn, who served this country for more than 33 years in the U.S. military, a career which culminated as Director of Defense Intelligence Agency, the nation's highest-serving military intelligence officer, and then went on to serve as President Donald Trump's national security advisor. General Flynn was, of course, viciously smeared and baselessly attacked in the Russian collusion hoax, but through the grace of God, he not only survived, but he has been completely and totally exonerated. If you have not seen the documentary Flynn, I strongly recommend it to you. You can see it at Amazon Prime or Apple TV. It is the shocking truth about the effort to destroy this great American patriot. Let me say on a personal level that I have met many generals, presidents, senators, governors, and others. But Mike Flynn may be one of the finest patriots, one of the finest Christian gentlemen, and one of the most loyal friends a man can have. General Flynn, welcome into the Stone Zone.
Roger, thank you very much. What a great honor it is to be with you here this evening. I mean, what a time we live in, isn't it? I mean, it's just amazing historical experience that we're all going through right now. I mean, wow. I mean, did you ever think that your life, in your lifetime, with all the things that you've done and all the things that you've been challenged by and with, that we'd ever be living through a time like this?
No, and the good news is the globalists are on the run. The forces of freedom are on the ascendancy, and you have been a key leader in this sea change in America. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is currently being viciously smeared by fake news NPR with the false claim that he shared classified information. This kind of reminds me of the false reports they used on you to try to take you out of the Trump administration in 2017. General Flynn, what is your reaction?
Yeah, I think that what's happening is that they're desperate, and they are really on their heels because Trump has made so many strategically smart moves, and actually a guy like Pete Hegseth has brought so much energy back into the Department of Defense that was so necessary, not just, in terms of our warfighting prowess, but also just the idea of, everybody kind of, get in there and mix it up, and the type of leader that we need right now. And I think what's happened is that the left and their minions in the media have really just, they're desperate. They're trying anything to smear. They typically will label, all these kinds of things. And when they do that, what that is very telling of is they're what they're showing. They're showing their rear ends in a lot of ways by basically attacking and lying and deceiving the American people to distract from what is otherwise a great America First agenda that both Pete Hegseth is carrying out on behalf of the President of the United States as well as Trump. And they're really trying to just distract people.
We will be right back with more of General Michael Flynn on the other side, so don't go away.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. We're talking to General Michael Flynn, America's General. General Flynn, we know now definitively that the Russian collusion hoax and the plot to destroy President Donald Trump and his presidency, to destroy you, to destroy me, to destroy Paul Manafort, was born in the Oval Office, that President Barack Obama was directly involved. Vice President Joe Biden helpfully suggested that you be falsely charged under the Logan Act. National Security Advisor Susan Rice, FBI Director James Comey, and CIA Director John Brennan were all in on this plot. It was the greatest single abuse of power, the greatest dirty trick in American history, in which the full authority of the U.S. government and the extraordinary capabilities of our intelligence agencies were utilized using two completely false assertions that the Steele dossier compromised Donald Trump, it was a fraud, or that the Russians conducted an online hack of the Democrat National Committee, both falsehoods. My question to you is, will anybody be held accountable? Will anybody actually be punished for the greatest dirty trick in American political history?
Yeah, and I think that's a $64,000 question, right? I mean, one of the big things going on across America right now because of the release of the full unredacted files on Russiagate, and I know a number of people that are digging through these, as well as tying back into what the Durham report came out with. So there's a lot of data that is being and dots being connected. So the answer to the question is, will anybody be held accountable? They have to be held accountable, Roger. This is beyond a dirty trick. It was a conspiracy to undermine a duly elected president, and to do so, they went after his sort of inner circle and his closest friends and advisors, and tried to do anything that they could to destroy a president, not to just destroy Donald J. Trump, but to destroy the sitting president of the United States of America. And that's just an incredible criminal act from my perspective. And so I know now that with the release of the files, with the tying back into of what the Durham report came out with, because I do think now that the Durham report came out, a while back, and with the release of these files, I spent the better part of an hour and a half, probably 2 hours today, with a couple of researchers who are going through this stuff again. And what they're learning, what they're discovering is how far back this thing went. And the Democrat Party, knowing that Hillary Clinton was going to be the heir apparent, and of course Donald J. Trump wins the primaries, gets in. He gets through a great convention in the summer of 2016, and then all of a sudden you roll into now President-elect Trump, and as you just stated, Barack Obama on the 5th of January 2017 has that cohort of really thugs around him, and Jim Clapper, Brennan Comey, Susan Rice, Sally Yates was another one in that room, and they decided to basically continue on to try to take down President Trump. I mean, that is just an unreal when you think about the type of government that we've always had, the freedoms that we've had. You've been in politics, your whole adult life, Roger. I mean, it's always been about debating each other and whether one side of the aisle likes big government, the other side likes small government, whatever those issues are. But we never came to this level until Barack Obama arrived on the scene. Now, I don't know whether or not they're going to go after a former president of the United States. They tried to do it with Donald Trump. The left certainly did. So I do think that there's something to be, there's a precedent setting there. I mean, you certainly lived through and saw and witnessed to the Watergate conspiracy, right? I mean, this makes Watergate look like child's play. So the answer is, the American people are expecting accountability. And I can tell you, Roger, I am in touch with a lot of people on a daily basis. I have been all over this country in the last, not only in the last few years with you in many cases, but in the last few months. And I can tell you, people are expecting to see somebody held accountable. And it goes back to Russiagate. It goes back to all the egregious activities that were basically conspired by these groups like what we've mentioned and others. McCabe is another one that needs to be brought in there. These people must be held accountable. I hope that Pam Bondi, working with people like Ed Martin, people like Kash Patel, people like Dan Bongino, and others in the administration, actually create some. Maybe it's a sequestered grand jury. And they start to relook a lot of this stuff, because if we don't hold these people accountable, they will do it again, Roger. And we all know that. And we cannot have that happen in our country again, ever. This can never happen again the way this happened. And people are going to have to be held accountable.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think, frankly, that John Durham took 5 long years basically to tell us what many good, solid investigative journalists like Lee Smith had already determined. Yeah. But he took 5 years to make sure the statute of limitations had run out, and then he indicts the guy at the very, very, very bottom of the totem pole, a guy named Sussman, a lawyer who was involved in promulgating the Steele dossier. This is like indicting the guy who was driving the getaway car in a bank robbery for double parking while you let the bank robbers get away. But here's the problem for them. There is no statute of limitations on the crime of treason. At a minimum, John Brennan, who I think is really the chief perp here in this operation, is guilty of treason, and frankly, I think he should be charged and he should stand trial. Let me move into this story because it's one that I think you sent me and I found fascinating. A top U.S. neuroscientist and military advisor, Mike Beck, has confirmed reports that are credible that say directed energy weapon attacks have happened on U.S. soil and have targeted U.S. personnel abroad. What can you tell us about these so-called microwave weapons, and do you believe that they haven't been used in this nation?
Yeah, so it's a great investigative report done by Catherine Herridge, the indomitable Catherine Herridge, and she's done a really superb job of digging in and gathering the right facts. Now, directed energy weapons, I can tell you that off of surface ships, right, naval ships, other surface ships that are used at sea to deter, piracy. We still have piracy that occurs off of different coastlines. Those types of weapons are used to deter those types of attacks against merchant vessels. And we know this. In fact, we saw a lot of this type of use out in off of Somalia during the days when the piracy activities were upwards of, they had seized almost, I think, 50 or 60 different merchant vessels. So the merchant Marines started to use these directed energy type weapons off of those ships. Now, and this was back in like 2007, 2008 timeframe, so quite a while ago. So now what we're talking about is directed energy weapons being used from facilities, buildings, and such. And like the most famous case is the one down in Cuba, where a group of diplomats were, felt affected. They were basically, they were given where they felt like they had gotten ill. And what we're learning these directed energy weapons, which are very precise, almost laser-like focus against the targeted population or the targeted array of people that they want to go after. And in this case, what it's showing is a type of weapon system that nobody should be surprised that these things exist. It is in the past. I think people thought about these types of things only being seen in science fiction movies, when in fact these are very real, and they've actually been around for quite a while. They have become far more sophisticated because of the ability to be able to move essentially electrons like you would shoot a bullet out of a rifle. You're firing electrons in a very intense and very, very directed way, like the acronym stands for, directed energy weapon, almost right directly at an individual. And I think from Catherine's great reporting, I think what we're going to find out is that this has been going on for a lot longer, and we're seeing it happening, in and around a lot of embassies around the world, a lot of U.S. embassies around the world. I believe this is something that the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy are going to have to come to grips with, and they can't hide this anymore. What we're going to have to do is to really highlight this to the right people. We still have to protect the capabilities that we have, but I do believe that the American people are going to be demanding more answers on this, especially because of this report that just came out.
The Fox commentator, Mark Levin, who also has a show on this very network, writes, "We are looking terrorists in the eye who have threatening tens of millions of us with death as they are developing nuclear weapons and are within weeks of succeeding. Is there any generation of Americans before us that would not have dealt a deadly blow to such an enemy before they could destroy us? Will we be the first? It's not as if this is the imagination of warmongers run amok. How insane are those who demand that we essentially ignore this threat or appease it in some fashion?" Clearly, Mark Levin, who I like, is advocating strikes on Iran. I personally think that would be an egregious mistake. How do you feel about a preemptive strike on Iran?
Yeah, I think what we should be doing, and we have a great commander down there at U.S. Central Command who is responsible for the area of responsibility out there from a military perspective, from a uniform military perspective. I think Pete Hegseth and the team that Donald J. Trump has in the White House is a smart group of people. So how do I feel about it? I do not think that the United States of America should be engaging in any kind of direct military actions against Iran right now. What I do believe is we should have sufficient military capabilities in the theater, in the region there, whether it's from Diego Garcia or parts of the Middle East. I do believe that the Israelis, as a conduit, if you will, they're already. You have to believe that they're already contemplating some of these actions, and what they should do, or what they should feel, is they should feel very much supported by the United States of America for the types of tools, capabilities, weapon systems that they will need if, in fact, they decide to do that. Now, I will tell you that over 10 years ago, Roger, and it was Barack Obama that said, and I think John Kerry as well when he was Secretary of State, where they said, well, Iran's not going to they won't have a nuclear weapon for another 10 years. Well, here we are. We're more than 10 years. The ability to enrich uranium up to a certain percentage threshold, which they've already done. So we can't kid ourselves any longer and think that, the alliance of Iran, which is allied with China, Pakistan, Russia, North Korea, those previous four nations that I just mentioned, all have nuclear capabilities, and then sit and believe that Iran does not have a nuclear capability. One of the things that Iran has is a very sophisticated missile system capability, very sophisticated. And then all you have to do is build the uranium up enough for the warhead, and then match a warhead to basically a rocket, right? And for them to do that, is not something this is not a no-brainer for them. I mean, or it is a no-brainer for them because they've been doing the missile technology for decades. So I think what we're going to see is a buildup of U.S. military forces in support of a potential deterrence effect, meaning to try to stop Iran from doing what they're doing while President Trump, through his emissary Witkoff, is doing some negotiations, all while Israel is preparing to take some type of action. And now it'll be on their time, on their schedule, so there's an element of surprise there. And I will tell you that if the Israelis decide to attack Tehran or decide to attack other targets in Iran, it is going to be unlike any other attack we've seen by the Israelis, in Iran or like we've seen in the past where they attacked places in Syria and places in Iraq. So I don't think we should be involved in this other than the provision of support and capabilities because, Israel is a great ally of ours. Iran is one of those places where I would prefer to honestly to foment some type of unrest. And I do think that the Iranians right now are on their heels. I really believe they're on their heels because their surrogates in the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis have been devastated. Most recently, the Houthis have been devastated by our own Department of Defense. So the Iranians are clearly on their backsides, and what we don't want to do is put them in a position where they have to spring out and start using some of their missile capabilities and potential nuclear capabilities in the region. So I do think that we're on a real edge here, and I do know right now that our capabilities in the region are at a level that we have not seen probably certainly in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, especially some of our larger air and naval force capabilities that are out there. So very tense time. I do not believe, and I don't think Trump wants to be involved in any kind of war there. I think he would definitely like to settle this thing diplomatically, and we should be able to do it. I do think that at some point in time, the only way for Tehran to survive with in the sort of the global nation of nations is to have some type of regime change. They've been living under a dictatorship for far too long.
Up next, it's Keeping the Live and Alive with Debbie Nigro, sponsored by Native Path Collagen. But before that, we'll be back with General Michael Flynn, so whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with General Michael Flynn. We've got about 3 minutes. There's never enough time when I interview General Flynn. General Flynn, you are a student of history, a geopolitical thinker. What moment in our nation's history most accurately mirrors this very moment in time?
Wow. I'll tell you, I've thought a lot about that. It's different physical environment, but we are in one of those periods where, similar to the beginning of the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War, where we were in a physical, war between, a very divided nation, and we are right now in a cognitive war as much as a spiritual war with a very divided nation. And I think that at that time at the beginning of the Civil War, the numbers, when you start to do comparative figuring and data analytics, the North clearly had a larger footprint, and they were able to, of course, dominate the war at the end of the day. We are in a place now where I think that there is a larger percentage of people, more than we know, that are actually very patriotic people, love the country, and don't like what they see coming from this very progressive, communist socialist left of that is part of our fabric of our country. And so what I want and what I believe is that we will dominate this because people's patriotism, people's desire for freedom will overcome this inertia that does come out of a couple of segments of society, mainly some of our, clearly the media, some of the political institution on the left, and some other institutions like academia, as an example. So I believe if we were going to do some type of comparative thing, to me, the Civil War was a far more physical one. This one is more cognitive, intellectual, mental, emotional, and certainly spiritual. And to finish this line of thinking, I do believe that we are going to have to return our country to a much, much stronger set of Judeo-Christian principles and values, Roger, and we must be fearless about those values.
I completely agree. I think it was Lincoln said, it's not a question whether God is on our side, but whether we are on God's side. I want to thank my special guest, General Michael Flynn, and thank you for tuning in to the Stone Zone. Until next time, God bless you and Godspeed.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.